McLaren put in their right of review request, and shock horror, it was rejected. Waste of time, right? As we said before. Or was it? Was there a little bit more to it? Something that we can dig into? Well, that is what me and Ammar are about to do. Let's go. So, Ammar, just a quick breakdown of the stuff that's happened since we did our last video, which was, it feels like we only recorded it yesterday. Did we record it yesterday? It might have been.
It seems like it.
Um, the first thing I need to do is apologize because I have made a error. It does happen every now and again. I might as well just admit to it. So the guidelines that we talked about in which the defending driver has to stay on the track were actually from the original 2022 guidelines, but that line about the defending driver needing to stay on track was removed for the 2024 update. So they're no longer that line is no longer there. So actually, Max didn't have any obligation to stay on track while defending. So actually, that probably changes most of my thinking on this. In that, in terms of the actual regulation and guideline as it's written, Lando was banged to rights. He had to get a penalty for that. That's just unfortunately how it is. That being said, uh, McLaren still put in a right of review, and their their new evidence, evidence as it were, was basically handing back the stewards the decision that they made and saying, "I think you need to look at this in a slightly different way." And it was obviously rejected because the steward said, "Well, you can't use our judgment as your evidence. We know about that because we did it. We were there when we said it." So that didn't count, and summarily it was rejected. But I do want to talk a little bit about what they said, which was that uh, because Lando was ahead on the approach to the corner, despite the fact that he didn't get to the apex first, actually the roles had been reversed, is what they are postulating. That actually, rather than Lando being the attacking driver, because he was ahead, he was now the defending driver and was therefore entitled to some space on the exit by the attacking driver, which was Max Verstappen, and therefore contending that Lando was pushed off the track and shouldn't have got that 5 second penalty. First question to you, Omar. What do you think of that as an argument?
I think that's a fair argument, right? This sort of goes back to what I was saying the last time is you have rules, right? But no two corners in Formula One on any given track are the same. So, what is ahead, what is behind is sort of subject to interpretation to a certain extent. And there's a wide margin of who interprets what. And the
Yeah, I
problem we
agree with
have
that.
right now is you have stewards that are interpreting it the same way. I guarantee you, if there were a different set of stewards next year and the same thing happened, given what the current regulation is, which I believe will change, they would interpret it probably differently. So that's the problem you have. I don't see any reason why McLaren did anything wrong by appealing because there was nothing in it for them to lose other than some money. But
Yeah,
I think that's a valid argument from where they stand. It still doesn't mean that it's a winning argument, but it's a valid argument.
yeah, I think it was worth a punt. And I can understand where they were coming from. But as we know, because that bit of evidence wasn't new, it was obviously going to be rejected. And at the end of their statement, the stewards said that, look, we're just following the rules by rejecting this because we don't think this is any kind of new evidence. But it's down to the FIA to change the rules in terms of appeal so that we could at least argue this one out with the team uh, and the aggrieved in person.
No.
And okay, so this is where I'm a bit split, and maybe you can help me, right? Because there's now a, if that were to go through, right? If the FIA changed the rules and lowered the bar, as it were, for the new bit of relevant bit of evidence that's provided, and actually, on appeal, you could just rediscuss the same thing. There's two sides to this, right? There's the side that says no because you then lose the spontaneity of the decision, right? You can have a decision made contemporaneously at the time that could then be challenged and could ultimately change the result of that race 96 hours a week down the line. Um, so actually, that's not cool, and we shouldn't do that. But the other side of it is, in certain circumstances, the stewards might agree that actually we got it wrong, and therefore there's a sense of, well, is it justified for the right decision to be made, even if it comes 5 or 6 days later, and we change the result because of it? That's the challenge here. That's the balance that's being questioned. I think I know where I stand on this, but I do want to know what you think.
Well, I think the problem with that is not just the spontaneity of it. This is a very subjective decision. It's one thing to go back post race and weigh a car and say it's underweight. That's a more black and white thing. You can say it's in the regulations or not, even if it is off out of the regulations by the slightest bit of margins, right? It is very black and white. It's very objective. These are subjective decisions, and that's why you have human beings making those decisions. It's not like putting someone on a weighing scale and saying 63.9, you need it to be 64, you're off. That's not what this is, right? That's just simply not it. So I don't agree with that. The other problem is, what if the season were to end on a race like this and then 5 days later or 7 days later? That is just not a good look for a sport. It's one thing to have controversy and sort of back and forth and all of that. Those I think are good in terms of getting more attention, more eyeballs, more discussions, more clicks, more likes, blah, 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 blah. But you do have this sort of tipping point of where you're now taking away the integrity of the sport itself, right? So I don't think that having that over and over again, and this could be something that potentially could be litigated each race, really. You just don't want that to happen across the board where we leave on a Sunday thinking this is the classic, and forget race winner or not, right? Just think about it across the board, right? You're going to keep on having these things. I just don't think it sort of helps the fabric of the sport itself.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think if you were playing football, and by football I mean soccer, like it's the same thing. Like if a penalty is awarded, even if it's a mistake, you have a mechanism in game, VAR, to be able to change the decision that the referee made potentially, but you're not going to go back a week down the line after a lengthy appeals process and have that penalty removed. That doesn't work. And I think in F1 it's a similar kind of situation. What if Lando, after overtaking Max and getting his didn't get a 5 second penalty, and then ended up
Yeah.
overtaking two or three other cars, and then they changed the result later on? That changes not just his result, but it changes the result of two or three other people. What if there's more than one car involved? And this is where I agree with you. I think this is a very although they've put guidelines to it and rules to it, it's a very subjective exercise. And if you have a team coming in and saying, I don't agree with your interpretation, well, then that's your interpretation, and a very biased one at that, because you are trying to change something in your favor. But the stewards have to be objective. They have to look at this from a pure competition point of view, giving both sides the same amount of leeway. So for them to turn around and go, actually, yeah, you're right, your interpretation is better than ours and it benefits you, I don't think that makes any sense. And it takes away the spontaneity of the decision as well. So you get a different result 5 days down the line. I think on both sides it doesn't work.
Yeah, and at that point, what's the point of having stewards, right? Like if that's going to be the case, you as a steward are in charge of making this interpretive decisions. You are
Yeah.
the human element of it. Otherwise, just have an AI bot do it. But to be honest, Shez, let's also acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is every sport is littered with issues like this that sometimes change the outcome of games, sometimes change the outcome of championships. It happens. It is just a fact of life. So to a certain extent,
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
possible to
Totally
put
agree with
in
you.
places in there, and making rule changes always have some unintended consequences that I guarantee we'll be talking about 6 months from now or a year from now when something different happens, or maybe even 2 years from now. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think on a fundamental level, I would just sort of dumb it down a little. I hate to say dumb it down, but let's just say we simplify it to the idea of watching the race. Look, I'm a big fan of Max, and he is doing absolutely nothing wrong because the rules allow for it. but that did not it that did not feel like a move that was, championship worthy, in my opinion. Now he is doing
On
that
whose side? On
on
Max's side.
Max's side. On Max's side, he is doing exactly what the rules allow him for him to do. So I'm not casting any aspersions, any blames, or anything like that. But that does not look right. I mean, he essentially pushed Lando off the track. You shouldn't be allowed to do it. Now he's very clever, very smart, absolutely 100%. If this were my driver, I would be defending him to the core too. So I get it. But the reality is, if your race towards you are there to sort of look at the spirit of the regulation too. That's the reason why you have a human being. So I honestly think we're just going to be talking about things like this for eternity, because that's just part of the sport. And let's just say, if it was let go as a non-penalty, or if there was no penalty, or whatever it was, let's just say it's the opposite of what this was, we would still be talking about it. That's just the reality of it, right? Because
Mm.
we're coming here and saying, oh, should I have been penalized, right? It would just be opposite. So
Yeah, yeah. I think in summary, I I applaud McLaren for trying the thing that they tried to do. It was never going to work, but I actually appreciate that there's such a high bar for an appeal because unless the stewards have massively missed something, all you're doing is asking them to reinterpret something they have already interpreted.
but as I told you, when we last talked about this was not about this ruling. This is about the bigger picture, and what they have done, or at least contributed to, is some revision in the rules, right? Which will be delivered at some point in Qatar, I think.
Okay, let's talk about that because I think that's also important because the result of all of this was that there was a GPDA meeting, I think between the US Grand Prix and the Mexican Grand Prix, and that was attended by the FIA, the stewards that had been at the US, or at least one of the steward representatives that had been present at the US, and F1, and apparently it was quite a collegiate. Collaborative conversation. That's good. I'm glad everybody was able to have a sensible conversation. But the result of it was that I think there were two camps. One camp that said, look, the rules are fine as they are. We need them the way they are because some people, in apparently Valtteri Bottas's words, some people are taking the piss. Versus a bunch of drivers that also thought that the rules were super uh, what's the word were too constricting and there was too much regulation about moves. Can you take can you take three guesses uh which drivers were on there it's too regulated side of this?
Max.
Oh, what a surprise. Yes.
Yeah,
Max Ocon and Magnussen were on that side of it, and on the other side of it, there was Bottas,
very.
Hamilton, Gasly, that little lot, right?
What did
Uh,
Leclerc say? Do we know? Does any been leak on that? Because that would be
I don't
he's
know.
the guy that you have to watch for in all of this, because I think everyone else's position is pretty much well known, right? The
Yeah.
question is, where does Charles think this all of this is there? Because
I,
he's the guy who can go wheel to
I,
wheel.
I don't know, but I found it fascinating that's where those two groups aligned. And from what I understand, there will they're still discussing this, but around the Qatar time, if everybody is in agreement, there will be a slight change in the rules to resubmit the defending driver needs to stay on the track. But there was also a discussion, as we talked about introducing a gravel deterrent on the exit of corners like this, which I've since found out wouldn't really be possible at turn 12 because it's built on clay. So because it's built on clay, they can't put gravel there.
Just put some
Because
ice
well, they could put ice there, but it would just melt. Have you been to Austin? You have
water.
been to Austin. We know
We
this.
were
It
right
would
there actually
melt.
at that turn.
Literally, it would melt.
We should
And
throw something Skittles or something on the top.
Skittles would be good. I'd be up for throwing some Skittles down there. But the argument is that to then convert it back to allow
Yeah.
motorcycles to race on it wouldn't be possible. So, look, as much I mean, I'm up for having like some Tech Pro right up against the wall, but right up against the corner. But that's obviously never going to work. But I think a physical barrier would probably be the
Actually,
solution.
Jack Pros would
But
do it. It would be easy. It would be easy to put. It would
it'd
be
be too
hard.
close, man. Like the speed they're coming into that corner, it'd be so fast. Like you wouldn't be able to bring it in that close. That's why they have the runoff. But I guess my overall feeling about all of this is still that I'm on Max's side of this. Is too regulated. I feel like your idea of having a paid permanent steward that sees lots and lots and lots of these all the time, but with a much more slimmed down guideline that just that just gives the basics that you're not allowed to have contact with the other driver and forcibly push them off the road. I think that's all you need.
It's quite
So
simple,
these
actually.
ongoing discussions, as collaborative as they are, and I'm glad that they're all having fun talking about rules and regulations, but I feel like you don't need them. You just need a better steward.
Well, I also think this is the problem we have in the reflective community that content creators across the board are, right? We're expecting every rule to be applied equally in the same way that it can for different incidents at different turns with different drivers. And the reality is the equitable solution is to not handle this the same way for every driver. Not every driver is pushing the
Ooh.
limits like Max
Ooh, I don't know about that.
and K-Mag are, maybe Leclerc are. Not
Oh,
everyone's doing the same thing. But let's be honest, like where else have you seen this happen? This is
that
only being talked about because it's Max and it's the championship. And I look at again, I will clarify again because many of you will come at me, but I'm 100% down for Max defending this way because if the rules allow for it, why wouldn't you? So you
yeah.
did not do that, right? But the reality is, you
Okay,
kind
for the
of
record, I am not in favor of treating different drivers differently. But I do think
behavior
that
is different.
if
So
Max was given a penalty for doing what he was doing, he would change his way of driving. Of
but
course he
Chad,
would. He has done it before.
how many times have you come back and said, "Well, this is why I think Max is a little bit over the limit." I'm just saying sometimes it's all about the eye test, right? You don't see other drivers do that, but if someone does that
That's
consistently, then your yardstick has to change on it. That's all I'm saying. Look, again,
yeah, but I think that's why they've introduced legislation for it as opposed to just letting the stewards get on with it.
I'm all down for doing something that's distracting or disconcerting enough for all of these drivers to not do that.
Mm.
I'm with you. Maybe it's not a gravel trap, but some kind of like skidding thing where if you go there, you're gonna be toast. So you don't want to do that. I think some kind of deterrent to your point.
I, th
I'm
I
actually gonna come around to that idea. I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the future what will end up happening is that just like on a video game, you'll go off and I don't know, it'll cut your engine power or it'll break the inside wheel or something, so you slow down and you
Can
don't
I
gain
give a
any
more
advantage, something
simple
like that.
idea? Can I
Hmm.
give a more simple idea? Every time you go off track, there is a second, like after there's a penalty. Just put some kind of penalty on there. That's it. It's very
Ah,
simple.
oh, I don't know. I just want something I can see, not something that gets, I have to wait a few minutes for it. It says plus 5 second penalty. All of that is nonsense to me. I just want a physical bloody barrier. Anyway, okay, that I think kind of concludes our trilogy of videos about the Austin Grand Prix controversy and the driving guidelines that have been in the spotlight since then. Well, thanks very much, man. That was as usual awesome. If you like that, please like. If you haven't, please subscribe. Um, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one of them and we will respond to as many as we possibly can. We will see you guys shortly in the next one.
Later.